Hello and welcome to Mr. Clark After Dark, everyone. My name is Lucas Clark and I am a certified educator with Alberta Education and the Alberta Teachers Association. All conversations and interactions exchanged is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. In no way does the content discussed intend to be in violation of the ATA Code of Conduct or meant to target any individual student, teacher, or to belittle the profession in any way. If you have something that you would like me to discuss or have a story of your own to share, please reach out at lucasrdclark97@gmail.com. You can also send a direct message on Instagram at Mr. Clark After Dark. Hope you enjoy the show, and please do not forget to subscribe. Today's conversation is with the one and only Tom Keca. Keca is also a teacher here in Alberta and is a junior A hockey coach in the province for many years. Essentially, our conversation boiled down to the ambition balance between pursuing a career as a coach as well as an educator, with family, how to conduct yourself as a coach, what life is like married to an administrator, and the role being a community service member impacts your family. Hope you guys enjoy the conversation, and yeah, have fun.
Some different jobs there. Yeah. Was up at the heavy industrial campus, worked down at continuing education, was there for adult education, like did a bunch of different stuff.
So was he like actually teaching, or was he kind of like an administrator?
Yeah.
Or like,
well, both.
Yeah,
Started as a teacher.
Yeah, that's a way to do it. If you're gonna do like an intellectual route, that seems to be like the most like lucrative. It's like being like a half administrator, like half teaching, or like mostly administrator. But yeah, even like talking to Mark about like kind of like the current education thing, because I've even said, oh, one day maybe I'll go and be like a professor, or like I'll work like kind of do the PhD route. And he's like, honestly, he's like, it's not even worth it. It's like you can do. He's like, a professor might work twice as many hours, like just doing like academic. He's like, it's either publish or perish.
Yeah.
Like you're constantly doing like academic work.
Yeah.
And then he said you don't get paid as much as you would just like running a school. And like you get your full summer off. He's like, it's just not really an ideal. So kind of doing the administrator route seems to be the more like.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, when you get long, to me personally, like if you get into the professional stuff, if you get a couple of years, now you've got graduate assistants that are like, you got no marking, you got no nothing, and you're done.
That's true.
You're
That's
done
true.
in April, right? Like don't.
Well, even like one of the professors I had, he was like, I didn't really get a steady paycheck until I was like 38. He's like, but after that, he's like, it was gravy. He's like one of my first offers. He said, it was almost $200,000 teaching political science. I was like, holy shit.
But at the end of the day, you know, going into teaching, you're not doing this for the money.
No. But it's like I'm still trying to find the balance of like I want to do this, but like how could I maximize kind of whatever for what I'm doing, kind of like the same thing. But
listen, my dad was all about, you know, like he's, you know, when you're retired and he's, you know, on the internet every day, he checks, you know, investments and all this kind of stuff. Personally, even if I could, I'm not ever going to retire until I absolutely have to. Yeah. I'm just not
like always doing something. So like, did you ever talk to your dad about like teaching and like how he taught? Like, was that ever kind of a conversation that you guys had? So why not, you think?
Well, I was a hockey player.
Yeah.
And when I finished grade 12, I went to Europe.
Yeah.
And then I came back. Yeah. I played for the Oil Barons. I went to Keca, did university transfer. And I knew I wanted to get into teaching.
Oh, okay.
And then I went back to Europe, and then I went to University of Lethbridge. So that through that whole time, I like, obviously, like I was fairly good education. Like so I was smart. Like I could have done a different stuff, but I'm not wired.
So why education, do you think? Like why did that kind of stick out?
Because I think there was a parallel with coaching there.
Yeah.
And for me, it was just, I was good at it.
Yeah.
And I didn't mind standing up in front of people and speaking and things like that. Like I've never ever been driven by the dollar. Like I've never. I could have went out to Syncrude and I could have done this and that for more money, but I don't. I personally don't feel that's more important.
Literally yesterday, I ran into one of the students we had here last year at Tim Hortons, and he buys me a coffee, and I'm like, so like, how are you doing now, man? Like, what's your plan? He's like, oh, I'm going into co-op. He's like, I'm finishing up my work term here, and he's like, and what he told me he's making in co-op is almost twice as much as I'm like. But at the same time, I'm like, man, that'd be sick. But I don't want to be like in -40 turning wrenches
When
in
I
the middle of
talk-
a field. Like
when I
it's
ask
not.
somebody that works out at the plant,
Yeah.
I'll never forget. And I said, okay, well, what's the best part? Oh, that 45-minute nap I get on the bus from my house. It picks me up in Beacon Hill. And I'm like, if the best part of your day
Yeah,
is the nap
Back
that
to
you
sleep.
get going to work,
yeah,
you're in the wrong job.
100%. Because
So-
like I've even heard the other rationale of like, oh, well, then you get 7 days off to kind of do whatever you want.
Brutal.
But like, I feel like even the week after school ended, like I had the week off in between school ending and summer school starting. I was watching like 8 hours of TV. I was like,
Yeah.
I don't even know what I'm doing with my life anymore.
No,
So I definitely need that kind of day-to-day structure. But like,
So my dad, like it's great. Like they're retired, and I told my dad, like, he says, "Oh, you got to do this. You want to retire?" I said, "Why? What am I gonna do?"
oh, I'd be so bored.
So,
Like even
but
today.
my dad,
Yeah.
and again, I know I'm repeating myself.
Yeah, that's all right.
My
no.
dad took the fucking day in my dad's life was when they discontinued the Edmonton Journal, because he would get the Edmonton Journal, and that was the only Christmas present he ever wanted.
Yeah.
Was a year subscription to the Edmonton Journal.
Yeah.
So he would get the journal every morning. He would get up 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Have breakfast and sit down and read the Edmonton Journal from the first page to the last page. Whether it interested him or not didn't matter.
So what do you think
The
that
home
is?
guard-
Like why? Like why?
My dad's
why?
one of the, now that he knows how to browse and use the internet.
Oh, unlimited news.
He just, my dad is a guy that just wants information. Like literally, you can talk to my dad about anything, and because he'll say, I read
He's
the journal.
from Croatia,
Croatia.
right? And like, was there? I don't mean to get too social studies here, but like that was a communist country. Yes.
Totally.
And so
Tito, man.
So do you right?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. So do you think that's like a need for information? Of like, my family knows what it's like to not have information. So like,
You know what? That's
I'm just gonna go through this
That's a good
because I
point.
can.
That's it. That's
Like,
a good point, right?
So I'm like, it's for me.
So my
like, I
dad-
never read. The
But
news,
but my dad. So obviously, you know, the educational system over there is different. So like when
Yeah.
you're done grade 9, you can specialize what you want to do.
Yeah.
So if you want to be a plumber, you go to like grade 10, you go to plumbing school.
oh,
If you want to be an electrician, you go to electrician school. If you want to do this, if you're not sure what you want to do, they've got a general thing. But if you already know what you want to do,
Yeah.
you can start specializing in grade 10, like in high school.
wow. I feel like we're getting a little bit more
So
kind of.
my dad knew that he wanted to be an educator of some type. So
Yeah.
he went to teachers college, like
Yeah.
grade 10. So that's
grade 10.
well, yeah, right. So you take courses, and then when you're done grade 12, back then you needed to serve 1 year in the army.
Yep.
Like, I want to say obavezno, but that's Croatian, like mandatory,
Okay, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So he went, and after the year, they tried to groom him to
Mhm.
stay in the army to become a whatever it is, a lieutenant and all, like
because like the
to teach.
soft educator skills are very
Exactly.
useful. Obviously, like
And he
military
did-
teaching,
he did-
coaching, it's all kind of a similar like, progression.
He didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So they said, no, you know, you gotta. So he
Yeah.
packed up his stuff, left his family,
And how did he end? Like, I think you
ran
told
to
us
the
before,
Czech
but, like-
Republic,
Okay, yeah.
and was there for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
He had a friend who he worked with in Croatia that set him up with an uncle, so he was there in the Czech
Yeah.
Republic for a little bit. But the plan was to get to Canada.
Yeah.
So I
So
really
what year is this for like getting
67.
to Canada? 67. Okay.
Trudeau. So my dad,
Oh,
diehard
yeah.
liberal.
Okay.
You will never ever convince my dad to vote anything other than liberal.
Mhm.
And it's worse now because the last name is the same, Trudeau.
Yeah. It's like,
Right?
Same guy.
But my dad swears and owes everything that he has to Pierre Elliott Trudeau because he let him in the country, he let him do this.
That's fair.
So that's
Yeah.
how my dad is.
Yeah.
No, I know that he doesn't.
Just trying
He
to-
might not vote. What?
Just try to get the mic a bit more in front of you there.
He might not vote
Yeah.
liberal.
Yeah.
But it's not like he's going to vote conservative,
Yeah. Yes.
right? He'd
Yeah.
rather not vote.
Yes. Yeah.
But my dad owes everything to.
Yeah.
So he came 68 and worked in a broom factory for 12 cents an hour, and wow, convinced my mom to come and made a life for himself.
Wow.
Played professional soccer. Like back then, there was
Really?
there was like a soccer league like the Western Canada, so they would
Yeah.
have. I think it was Winnipeg, Regina, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver was like a thing. So my dad played for Regina. A bunch of Germans and other immigrants that played on the team, and Yeah.
Wow. So I guess like athletics has always kind of been like part and parcel with kind of your upbringing too. Then
Totally.
I guess. Okay.
Totally. My dad was a soccer player.
Okay. Did he ever play hockey or anything? Like why?
No,
Like why
never.
hockey? Like why did that like appeal
Well, you're
to
in
you?
Canada.
Fair enough. That's fair.
My dad, I'll never forget this.
Mhm.
My dad registered me for hockey.
Mhm.
The very first day. This is even before like. Have you ever heard of Townside Arena?
No.
Okay. So back where Keanu College and Comp is, that
Yes.
parking lot
Okay.
used to be Townside Arena. That was where the rink in town was.
Is that like where the wellness center is now, or
No, in front
Oh,
where
okay.
the parking lot in front of the theater.
Okay.
That used to be a hockey rink.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a big.
Yeah.
It was your classic small town wooden barn.
Yeah.
So my parents signed me up. Back then it was called Mites,
Okay.
which today would be novice or under 9 or
Yeah.
whatever. And we showed up the first day.
Yeah.
And I remember showing up with my parents. Everybody else was out on the ice with full equipment.
Yeah.
I showed up with a helmet, gloves, and skates. That was it.
That's all you
And a
need.
stick. And then they were like, he can't. Like, he can't go out there.
Yeah, he's from Croatia, he'd be all right.
So they gave my dad a list.
Yeah.
And said, you can come back tomorrow. It's the second day of, they have the
Yeah.
tryouts or skates or whatever.
Yeah.
So we went to McLeod's, and McLeod's used to be right across from the courthouse. Sometimes now it's it used to be the city building, then it was like the haunted Halloween, like the
yes,
Halloween,
it's like the brick sometimes.
the brick.
Okay,
Sometimes
yeah,
used to be McLeod's.
Okay,
that was the big.
Store.
That was the big department.
Okay.
That was the only store in town.
Okay.
It was everything.
Before the Zellers time. Yeah.
Like there was nothing. There was Peter Pond School and St. John's. Like there was
Peter
no
Pond
mall.
School.
There was
Wow,
no
okay.
there was no mall.
Yeah.
So that's where you would go if you needed anything, because there was no Canadian Tire, no nothing.
Yeah.
And there was a list. Oh, you need a helmet, and there was somebody there, and they got me outfitted. And then the next day I showed up in full gear, but the
Ready
full
to
day,
go.
like classic immigrants who just came and said, "Oh, hockey, here you go." Stick, not even gloves, like
Stick
work,
puck? Let's
like
go.
work gloves, stick,
Yeah.
skates, and a helmet. That's all I
Yeah.
had.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Wow.
you should. Everybody's got all this equipment.
This guy's
Like,
tearing it up.
like, what's going on? So yeah, that was it. Yeah,
Oh,
and the rest is
man.
history.
All right. So how was like what was kind of education like when you kind of first get into it, like getting into like how old were you when you started teaching? And what was the beginning like for you?
Are we?
Oh yeah.
Oh really?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Jesus, I
No,
gotta
that's
watch out
all
what I say.
don't even worry about it.
My teaching thing.
Yeah.
I went to University of Lethbridge
Yeah.
at that time because Lethbridge was considered the best education school because you had the 5th year.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a combined degree. I graduated a Bachelor of Art, Bachelor of Education.
Yep.
And the plan originally was for me to go back to Lethbridge. I loved Lethbridge. That's where I played university hockey.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I thought, like, you have your adolescent friends, your teenage friends, and then you have your university friends. And so all my university friends were around that area. So my plan was to live in the Lethbridge area. But I came back for the summer, and it was getting near the end of the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Plan was to go back to Lethbridge and just sub for a year and sort of to get your feet wet. But a job opening came at Dr. Clark's school.
Yep.
So I applied for the job, interviewed. Back then it was Pam McGilvery and Lorraine Demers.
Okay.
Pam was the principal and Lorraine was the vice principal.
Yep.
I walked in, interviewed for the job, and they gave me the job right away. So this was on a Friday. School started on the Wednesday. So they had a couple of days where that grade 5 class didn't have a teacher.
Okay, so you're like thrown kind of right into it.
Thrown right in. Yeah. So they said, okay, you're going to teach grade 5. Never told me anything. They said, be ready for Tuesday to do the 4 cores.
Yep.
Language arts, math, science, social.
Yep.
Okay. So I spent all weekend, getting ready.
So what was that like? Like spending all weekend? Like were you like freaking out a little bit?
Freaking
like,
out because you don't know what you're doing. Like so. Classic, like any teacher, you're gonna do what I did for my summer vacation. You're gonna photocopy a couple math sheets just to sort of assess where the kids are and things like that. But I had no idea.
And so what grade was this?
Grade 5.
Grade 5. Okay.
So I showed up Tuesday, and they go, oh, and by the way, you're gonna teach health, art, and French on top of the core. I was like, what? I've never. It's
like Keca's kind of
never spoke.
So you're good.
Never spoke. So I said, okay. And they said, oh yeah, and your class has 35 kids in it.
Okay. Wow.
And they gave me
35
kids, grade 5. and they gave me the boys. Like the majority of the class were the boys.
So was that kind of on purpose, or do you think like it was like,
think
because you kind of had like a sports background?
I think it was
like,
because I was a male, I was single, the cool guy and all this, the athlete. I played with the Oil Barons. I sort of had, because of my dad, I did have a name a little bit.
Yeah, fair enough.
Playing with the Oil Barons, you sort of get known in the community. Yeah. And the other teacher was a female, Jackie Richer, who was outstanding. Yeah. And she had the majority of the girls and that. So it was. It was just sink or swim. It was just survive.
So what do you mean by survive? Like what was the most like draining part of that kind of first year?
There was nothing, because I'll never forget like it was about the second week. Okay. And I thought I was doing great. I thought this is we're tickety boo and nobody's getting hurt or whatever. So one of the moms called me or came into the school and said, I noticed that you haven't given the kids like a spelling list. Like, when is their spelling test? I was like, what do you mean spelling test? They said, well, last year, every Friday, they would have, the teacher would give them a list of words on Monday, and the kids would have to learn how to, write those and spell those words correctly. And then Friday, there was a spelling test. Yeah. I was thinking to myself, what a great idea. We're gonna do a spelling test. So that's sort of what we did.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Cut it out for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go on.
So that's what we did. I thought, well, what a great idea. So that was a little bit of a language arts session, but it was the interesting thing was, and this, and it's changed obviously since I went to school and you went to school, university. But you go through, and I don't know, because I did all my practicum in Lethbridge. Mm-hmm. It was a little different. Mm-hmm.
Like, how is it different?
Like, as much as practicum helped, it doesn't really prepare you when you're the head of the class. You're the only one there. You have to know. You have to know what's going on. The other thing that I was not prepared for coming back to Fort McMurray was I lived here my entire life. I was a Thickwood boy.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you mean by a Thickwood boy?
Well, so you don't think that it's different. You think Fort McMurray is Fort McMurray, and Fort McMurray is the same in all the areas. Yes. It's not. Yeah. So going down to Dr. Clark, now you're dealing with different demographics. Yep. There were kids that were coming to grade 5 that I was shocked at didn't have jackets or didn't have food. Yep. The one thing that really hit home quickly was the fact, as an educator, that you had to be prepared for the fact that the classroom or the school was probably the most stable environment that some of those kids had. Yeah. And now you go from being an educator, now all of a sudden you're a caregiver, you're a sounding board for some of these kids. Yeah. And I think that was the one thing that really hit with me, and everybody can interpret it differently, but pretty soon I realized, like, at the end of the day, does it really matter if we cover all of the curriculum? Like, you have this from, the program of studies from Alberta Ed, and you got to do this, or is it just the fact that these kids have to want to come to school because it's a safe environment? They've got somebody who cares about them and things like that. So to be completely 100% honest, I wanted to create a family atmosphere in my classroom.
So, like, how did you go about doing that?
So the first thing that we
did...
Spelling test? Spelling test was first. So the first thing that we did was we gave ourselves a name. And so I had everybody, and we were like, and again, this is the naivete of a first-year teacher, but this is what I'll never forget. This was maybe the first or second week, probably the first week. So it was, I said, okay, we're going to come up with a name. Okay. And now art class, I can't draw a stick person, right? Yeah. So back then you would have these cartoon pages that you could put paper over, and then you could trace it. And then now it looks like you drew it in that. Yeah. So I had all of the kids, okay, take out these things and now make a character, like a cartoon character of yourself. Now, being boys, at that time, there was a lot of muscle-bound guys with guns, like Rambo type guys. I personally thought, okay, great. Yeah. This is how you associate. Yeah. Like, everybody gave themselves a name. Yeah. They drew themselves. This is what I look like as a cartoon. I thought it was great, so I had guys with guns and knives, and I thought, well, listen, just to get these kids involved and interested in it was great.
Sounds like a normal family to
me.
Exactly.
So it was a Friday, and so then we got to come up with a class name. So we were 5K, and It would just happen that my last name was Keca.
Yeah, Keca, beauty.
It was 5K, and the other class was 5L.
Yeah.
Whatever. So, but the kids wanted to be known as the Gunners, the 5K Gunners. 5K Gunners. I thought perfect. Yeah. Establishing unity. Everybody, okay, this is what we're going to do.
Everyone's buying in.
Everybody's buying in. Gunners. Yeah. Oh yeah, and then everybody had their pictures. We posted all the pictures on the wall, and this was like, and I'm thinking like, this is gold, man. Like this. Yeah. Well, Monday morning comes in. Monday morning, and it's the old, Mr. Keca, can you please come down to the office? Mr. Keca, can you come down to the office? So I walk in, and Pam McGilvery and Lorraine Demers, who were the best bosses you could ever have, they were so polite and said, you know, Tom, we understand what you're trying to do, but do you really think having pictures of all of these kids with guns and machetes and knives and all this, and calling yourself the Gunners, what? And I was like, yeah,
you better watch out.
And I remember sitting back and, you know, I never thought about it. Yeah. You know, obviously the purpose was to set up this family environment, and I said, okay. Yeah. So then what I did was quickly, I used that as a teaching tool. We went back into the classroom, and I said, oh, this is great. And okay, so now, then I took a step back. I said, okay, so now, what do we think if somebody else was to look at us? Yeah. Would this be a classroom that you would want to come to if you were not part of our group? And the kids were like, oh, I said, it would be kind of intimidating. Yeah. I said, and that's not what we want. Yeah. So we quickly pivoted. That's
a good way to like kind of skirt it with your students too, not to like just change it because they were already kind of like feeling it. Yeah.
So we changed. So we were known as the 5K Cougars, and we spelled Cougars with a K. Wow. And everybody came up with new. It was another art class, which was just great, another art lesson. And we changed everything. So we were known as the 5K Cougars. And then to be completely honest, again, you go through university and you have IPPs and you have this and program. Like I didn't know about any of that kind of stuff. It was about survival. So for me, it was about establishing that family. So then what I did was I made sure that through the course of the year, any competition, back then you would have competitions, whether it was a penny drive, you would have a bottle sale or like a bottle drive to collect funds. You had a door decorating competition at Halloween. Mm-hmm. You had the Remembrance Day or the Christmas, whatever. Mm-hmm. I made sure that we won every single competition. And I had everybody pull in. We went over the top on it. Like, it was funny. I'm purging my house and I found pictures of stuff. Okay. Like, we went totally over the top.
It's like, we're raising $5,000 for this pizza party. I don't even care.
Like pennies, like I don't care. Where we get pennies, we got to win. Like it was, we got to win. Yeah. And I just felt like the kids pulled together. And then what we did was every time we won, you got the classic, you get a pizza party or whatever. Yeah. We would donate the pizza party to another class in the school. I would go out and buy for the kids, but I would select one of our students and they would go and they would present that to a different. So then you're giving that feeling that you're giving back to the community. And that. Yeah. So that's what we did. And listen, we won everything. Like we smashed everybody. And it was great. So I'll never forget. And it was funny. I was talking with my son. One of the rewards that we did was I took my kids to an NHL game. So we had it where I had some contacts with the Edmonton Oilers at that time. We rented a bus, a diversified bus. Mm-hmm. And we had it where, you obviously had to finish, everybody had to finish their homework and all this for a month or month and a half. And then we got on a bus, whatever day, it was like a Tuesday morning. We went down to Edmonton, went to the hockey game, and we drove right back.
Oh yeah, that's the way to do it.
And what amazed me was that you take for granted the fact that, I go to Edmonton whenever you want. I was a hockey player, traveled. Like I had some kids that had never been on a bus. So we had parents obviously as chaperones, but we went to an NHL game as like a grade 5. That's as cool. A grade 5 class. So it was I'll never forget the trip. I'll never forget the kids, seeing them enjoy being at an NHL game. And as adults, sometimes you need that. Things that we take for granted.
Yeah, like things it's like you have a career, like you have it pretty stable. Like you play junior hockey, so you're used to kind of traveling and playing hockey, but like this is brand new. Yeah. To some of these kids.
It was awesome. So It was I'll never forget that year. It was like I said, first year teaching, and the kids were just great, and then.
So were you coaching during this first year?
No,
as well,
I didn't.
No? Okay.
I came back to Fort McMurray, and I didn't do anything. I taught. I was your classic first year teacher where, you know, I was at school every morning an hour and a half before school opened to get stuff done. And then I was, you know, I remember living in Thickwood, and right after school I would stay and you would do a homework club or whatever, or, you know, you'd have kids that, you know, didn't have anywhere to go right after school. So I would hang around, I would go home, I would eat supper, and then I would go right back to the school. Like I spent an enormous amount of time, you know, at the school, but you needed to in order to.
And like, what kind of took so much time, do you think? Like, with like, I know that we always talk about like general prep, but like if you're talking about kind of the transition from practicum to actually like full-time teaching, like what was kind of the like main things that kind of took so much time, you think?
I think what's intimidating as a new teacher is when you look at some of these veteran teachers and they're just so organized and so planned.
Like
and you know that's going to happen.
Almost,
That's going to happen with time, you know, when you go through it. But I always felt like I'm a pretty detailed person, and I don't like last minute things. I like to be prepared. I like to be organized. Like I don't like it. I would hate to come to class and then not be ready.
Like, what are we doing today?
Yeah, exactly. You know, so it was just making sure that everything was prepared, that you were trying to stay 2 steps ahead.
Like almost planning every minute almost.
Exactly.
Did you ever feel like how am I going to use up all of this time? Like
no, you always ran out of time.
But that's usually what ends up happening. But I would always feel like a 90-minute block, I have no idea how I'm even going to like fill this up. And then all of a sudden you're a third of the way through your lesson plan. The 90 minutes is up. And it's like, okay.
And that's no problem because whatever you don't get to today, you'll get to, you know, tomorrow. And I think one of the biggest challenges now facing teachers is you look at your curriculum and what you're supposed to be teaching. But then I also think that the good teachers are able to look at the general concepts and relate it to what's happening in the world today. Like nowhere in your program of studies does it say, you know, you should be looking at the Ukraine and Russia conflict. But as a teacher, you have to.
Even if you're like a math teacher, like what
exactly
just being involved in almost anything, like
listen, when you're dealing with inflation rates and mortgage rates and all like all of this kind of stuff, you can go back to math. So I think that's the sign of a good teacher is when you can say, okay, this is the general concept that you're supposed to teach, but this is what's important to us like right now. And you know, you have to stay current. And I think that's probably maybe the biggest change that you've seen is that back in the day, like you still used encyclopedias, you still went to the library for information. Nobody had computers or internet or
was like
right. And things like that. Where now we're so caught up in I need to know now. Right now. I need that instant gratification. Whether I take a test, I need it marked tomorrow because I want to look on Power Schools and I got to find out what my mark is. Like I need to know right now whether it's worth continuing on or whether I got to pivot right away.
I know even in like just doing summer school here now, like I said, I was like, okay guys, I'll have your essays marked by Tuesday. So I kind of gave them a day, but then it's like one of my friends asked me to go golfing Tuesday night and then I had ball hockey. I was like, okay guys, it'll be Wednesday. Like I'll get to it Wednesday evening. Like they were they were just like, what? Like, what do you mean an extra day? I'm like, guys, like,
why can't you get this done? You suck.
I'm like, relax. Like, it's all good.
No.
But it's true. There's like a pressure to be like, I've even talked about like where does the teaching pressure come from? Like you even said, but like just then about kind of prepping and seeing all the veteran teachers. Like I think everyone, even if you like, that you did make a mistake, they'd be like, oh, don't even worry about it. But you feel like kind of yourself, like, no, I need to do this. I need to be there all the time. I can definitely like relate to that pressure. But
I mean, and that's why now looking back, you probably wasted so much time doing things that you didn't really need to do. But in that moment, it was important.
And Google Drive does help a lot. Like
it does.
Coming in here, especially like this was my first year, and like your kind of first year back after like a while away from teaching, but coming back and being like, oh, here's the Google Drive, like every unit, every course. I'm like, this is insane. Like the fact that, so I feel like a lot of that prep, even 10 years ago, is probably mostly like not taken care of because you still kind of like make it your own as you go. But a lot of it is kind of done. Like prior to you being at that school.
And the beauty is you can store it all. And we didn't necessarily have the luxury as older teachers, you know, the trial and error. You can look what other people did and then you can take it and tweak it. Back in the day, you couldn't. Because we didn't have that. Everything was a hard drive. Well, everything was hard paper, right? Like if I had it was funny again. Like you know, we're purging our house because we're selling. Like I found all of my unit tests, like all my unit plans, it was all on paper.
Wow.
And like my Bible as an old teacher was that coiled book that you would get in day one. This is what you would write it down. And then, halfway through you'd have all of the students' name. You'd have to write them down, and you would have all of their marks. They'd have those little flip pages in the middle, and you would have to write down every single mark that they got. And then the weight you had to make sure, where it's all done for you now.
That's true, because I guess even when I was going through school, like the report cards would have all been like paper. Here. Like your parents have no idea what's going on at school until like report card day came. They're like, "What are you doing?" Whereas now you can kind of see it 24/7.
And that goes back to us as a society. Like our society, we need to know right now.
Yeah.
Like I know even sitting with my wife's parents, Grampy is so tech savvy and all this kind of stuff, but. Like if we're having a conversation around the table and somebody doesn't know the answer, like he's Googling it. Like, so because we need to know right now. Like, it's not like, well, I can look at it and I'll look at the encyclopedia and all this kind of stuff.
Let's go to the library.
Yeah.
For a minute.
It was funny about last week on Facebook, somebody posted a picture of us back in 1986. Yeah. And, it was us with a couple beers, and there was like a 8-track, player in the back with the encyclopedias. And I thought two things that today's youth would never understand what it is. A tape deck and encyclopedias. Kids don't know what those are.
Yeah, because even like now you're kind of always on display.
Yeah.
Even like a smaller town, even if you're a teacher who doesn't have social media, if you're in a town of like less than 100,000 people, you're always seeing someone that from your school. So you're kind of like, it's a weird kind of change from student to teacher. I was like, I've kind of now need to be like, even for the first bit, I would kind of dress up better. Just like going to the grocery store, because I had this like feeling of like, oh, I need to look like a teacher everywhere. But I've kind of trimmed that down a lot. But
and back in the day when you would be out in the community and you would see your students, and it was a big thing for them.
Like, he wears a hat.
Well, yeah, but even now, we don't do it. I don't do it as much because we're obviously at a high school.
Yeah.
So it's a little different. I know that there are certain students that you almost consider them friends because, I'm still involved with hockey and you get that kind of stuff. But I know when I'm out with my wife, who's the principal of a school, and those little grade tours, see, Madame Keca.
It's like seeing a celebrity in public. You're
exactly.
Like, I don't even know.
Like, you go out on the weekends? You can go to Mac Island too? Like that sort of stuff. So that innocence of those younger students is quite neat. And I know that for me, again, it was very important that very first year was to get involved in the students' lives away from the school. Mm-hmm. So I'll never forget Katrina Pearson. Was a person who was a gymnast and a very good gymnast. Mm-hmm. So whenever she had a recital or an event, I would go to it, or we would have figure skaters, or we would have whatever it was.
Even like just attending school sports in general, you don't realize the actual difference it makes. Just like being there, especially if there are kind of like your more kids that like are kind of struggling. It's usually they're struggling because they kind of have that absence.
Yep.
So like when you're kind of there, not like needing to fill that role, but it does definitely help.
Well, I think one of the biggest things is, as an educator, we're all intelligent, and I think the biggest parallel that I draw in between hockey and teaching in a school is the fact that if you can show the students that you care about them in a bigger sense than just school, the more that they'll listen to you and respect you in that. Yeah. So for me, it was always about, I could be a mean son of a bitch, but the kids know, well, but he cares about me, so it's okay.
It's like he's doing this actually to help me.
Exactly.
They believe that when you're like kind of being a dick, you're doing it to serve them actually better.
So that's the biggest thing with the young kids. I make it clear, like, the saying that I have on the ice is, Kex isn't for everybody. Like, I get it. Because I'm a hard ass, it's black or white and that. Yeah. But they also know that but Kex cares about me, so it's okay. Now, if he wants
all of us to get better,
exactly. Yeah. If the kids don't know that, and you have that abrasive personality at times, kids are going to tune you out and you're done. Like they'll never learn because they'll never want to listen to you and that. So for me, it was always about, even before any learning has to take place or should take place, those kids have to know that you care about them.
So if you ever kind of had like an incident, you don't have to like, not like I'm interviewing you for like a job or anything, but like, have you ever had a case where a kid hasn't like responded to you well, and you kind of like, you're trying to find a workaround to kind of like rebuild that relationship? Like, how would you kind of build a relationship with the students, especially the ones that you're not really like clicking with it initially?
Yeah, well, geez, that's a great question, because my mind automatically goes to like hockey.
Find like a sport or something.
Yeah,
that they're kind of,
like in some instances that I've had. But I think if it doesn't click with a student, the first thing that the easiest thing to do is to blame the student. Well, the student's not doing this or the student's not doing that. Where really what you have to do as an educator is you have to look in the mirror first and say, okay, what do I have to do differently? How do I need to change in order to get through? And sometimes you sacrifice a little bit of what you believe in. I don't think you sacrifice too much, but I think the easier thing is always to blame the student. Say, well, he's not doing this. What do you mean by
believing? Like,
well, everybody's got their
I guess like
their core covenant
like a discipline philosophy kind
exactly,
of thing.
Exactly. So it's funny. Like in any hockey team that I've had, some of these coaches or some of these teachers, you come in the first day and now they're going to give you the class rules, and it's this long laundry list of rules, and I just get a kick out of it. Like, to me, I've got 2 rules: be on time, and be respectful. Like that's it. Everything else will take care of itself. Because if you have this long list, you have to enforce all of them. Because I really feel that if you have these rules and you don't abide by them, or you look the other way, then you're going to lose instant credibility.
It's easy to stop enforcing one of them.
So for me, for a lot of my hockey players, I'll just say, before you do anything, just ask yourself, what would Keca say? Like, would Keca say anything? And we all understand that true leadership, whether you're a teacher, a coach, or whatever, is what those kids do when you're not there. So I know that even with that grade 5 class, very challenging class, I had my desk in the back in the corner, and probably one of the most challenging students who was a behavior issue, who didn't do well, and when his good days were good, he was great, but when his bad days were bad, he was
watch out.
Well, what I did was I had his desk right next to mine. So back in the day when you would, your classic case of, okay, we've got these handouts, everybody needs one, I would get him to hand it out. Or any classroom responsibilities I would let him do, because you want him to feel valuable. So I would have him right next to my desk.
So did you ever find like they struggled with that proximity? Like,
no.
almost feeling like they're being picked on, or that was like
no.
kind of necessary?
I think to be honest with you, and it might have gone the other way. Right now, if I took a student and said, "Oh, you got to sit right next to my desk," I'm like, "Oh, screw you," or whatever. This guy liked it. He liked the fact that he was right next to me, and I gave him more responsibility.
So how long were you teaching before you went into coaching at first?
Well, I finished my first year back. I taught grade 5. I wasn't involved with the Oil Barons. Like the second year, I started coaching.
So how did that start? Like, how did you get into coaching there?
Well, so actually what happened was I went to the University of Lethbridge and I played 4 years. I had a 5th year of eligibility that I could still play, but I got approached by a parent who said, why don't you, would you consider coaching the last year rather than playing? And I had some injuries, and in all honesty, I wasn't very good. Like, I was good enough to play CIS, but I didn't, it wasn't like I was one of the best players, or, I was one of the fringe players. So I thought to myself, okay, like, playing is over. I wanted to get into coaching. So I actually, my final year university, I was a head coach of a rep team in Lethbridge.
So that was eligibility? Is that what do you mean by eligibility for coaching?
Well, you get no. So I could play 5 years at university. So I played 4. I could have played 1 more year, my last year of school, but I decided not to. So I quit playing.
Oh, so you're still in university but not playing.
I was a 5th year university student, and I was coaching rather than playing. And that's how I got into it. And I got very fortunate. I met some great people at that time in the coaching ranks, and I had done stuff with some teams in the Western Hockey League and Hockey Alberta. So there was just that easy transition.
So you're kind of in the world already a little bit?
I was sort of already in the world.
And so you went so that was in Lethbridge, finished university, then came to Fort Mac, but no coaching in Fort Mac.
I didn't coach my very first year because I was more concerned with teaching, and then with all of the time that I was putting in teaching, I just didn't have any time, and which was unfortunate, because that was the year that the Oil Barons won the Royal Bank Cup. So so Fran Gao was the head coach of the Royal Bank Cup team. Fran was the assistant coach when I played for the Oil Barons. So I'd known Fran. A good friend of mine, Kevin Higo, was the assistant coach of that team. So I came out to a couple practices through the year just to help out, but really I was too busy with the teaching. However, they won the Royal Bank Cup. which was great for the community.
Oh, yeah.
And all that. So the very next year, Fran moved on to Grand Prairie, and Kevin, who was the assistant coach, came to the head coach, came to me and said, "Hey, listen, would you want to come on and coach?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." It was great. So I was actually the assistant coach, for the Oil Barons.
So what was that like? Kind of being like not really kind of coaching a rep team to like not coaching to being a junior assistant coach? Like, or was that kind of like, was there kind of an imposter kind of feeling there at all? Or was it kind of like,
well, I mean, you're naive in the fact that you can coach anywhere, and you learn real quick that it's junior age, and I was maybe in over my head as an assistant coach.
You were probably what, 25, 24?
No, I was older because I didn't go to.
You went to Europe.
Yeah, I went to Europe and played 3 years in Europe, and that's all. I finished university. I think I was 27, 28. Okay. So I was a little
bit
older.
Of separation.
Yeah, I was a little bit older. So, and then when I came on, so the joke actually was, from a teaching perspective, I went from the penthouse to the outhouse. So for my first year teaching, I was fortunate enough to win the Edwin Parr Award.
Yeah.
So you're this teacher, and you can do this, and then the next year, being the assistant coach of the Oil Barons, it didn't allow me to devote as much time to the teaching part. So now we got into the fact where, okay, teaching is paying my bills. Yeah. But my love was coaching, and I always knew that I wanted to be a coach. So, we used to call some of those teachers, 9 to 3:30 track stars. They would get there at 5 to 9, and at 3:30 they beat half the kids out the front door, and they were in their cars and out the parking lot. So I was a little bit of that, and which I felt bad for. Well, I put so much time into the year before. I switched grades, so they actually moved me from grade 5 to grade 8 because they needed that male presence in the junior high wing. Yeah. So it was myself and Dan Rizzuto, who is a phenomenal teacher. Yeah. So Dan did the math and science, and I did language, arts, and social for grade 7 and 8. And then we had Maureen Butt and Sharon McDonald were the grade 7 teachers. So we had our own little wing. It was great, from that sense. But my teaching did, take a little bit of a hit.
So what do you mean by taking a hit? Like, what?
Just I was too busy doing the hockey stuff, and I didn't dedicate as much time as I probably should have.
So do you think the kids even noticed that, what do you think was like? Is this kind of the teacher pressure eating at you for not doing as much time? Like, do you think there was actually like a change in your work, or do you think that was just more placed on yourself?
I think there was, because also, when you're at grade 5, when they say, well, what grade do you want to teach? I always told myself, I never wanted to go down lower than grade 4, because to me, grade 3, grade 2, a little bit more babysitting, getting them tying shoes. More caregiver role, 100%. More tying shoes and this. And then grade 4 or 5 was when you could start implementing, guidelines and foundations, spelling tests, and this kind of stuff. And now you're hitting grade 8, where it's puberty and it's a little bit of more defiance, and you don't necessarily have as much control over those kids, because it just is what it is. I still tried to do as much as I could, and I still think that I did more than what some other teachers would have been doing, but to my standards. And I think at the end of the day, what's important is you get evaluated, you do all the stuff, but really the greatest critic of yourself is yourself, and what you demand of yourself. I always feel that I always demanded a little bit more of myself. I never wanted to be an individual that just scraped by. That was never good enough. So your first year as an assistant coach, like, you're into like, what was kind of like the beginning versus the end of year like, versus like how good or confident you felt as a coach? Like, how did that year kind of go for improving? Like, how did you get better as a coach in that first year? Well, it's also so different, because back then it was, again, video, and those things weren't as handy, and we weren't as advanced as we are now. So we did have to spend a lot more time, whether it was watching videos and doing this, and the planning of practices all had to be done on paper and by hand. So it was a little difficult. So I spent 2.5 years as an assistant coach. Oh, okay. There was a coaching change here in town, so then Gord Thibodeau came in. Yeah. So you were an assistant to Thibodeau? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So Gordy came in, and I was an assistant for him for a couple of years, and so now I'm hitting at about 4 or 5 years as an assistant coach. And again, like, life is all about timing and that. My wife and I met my wife, and we had gotten married, and she was teaching in town, and we were looking at starting a family. So we had the birth of our first daughter Maya, and now you're trying to juggle coaching and all this.
Yeah.
And I think I had so much respect for Gord, and we're best friends to this day.
Yeah.
At one time he told me, he says, like, it's time for you to be a head coach. Like, you can't always be the assistant coach.
Yeah. So were you teaching this whole time as an assistant coach?
Yes.
Okay. So how long did you teach for before you like stopped teaching?
Well, so I taught for 3 years, and that was when, I don't know whether before your time, but there was a teacher strike, and we hit the teacher strike, and I was this young buck who thought he knew way too much than what I really did, and I had, my feeling was that, we should strike, and we need to fight for rights, and you had too many, you had rightfully so, you had too many other teachers that were like, listen, I got to worry about where my next paycheck's coming on because I got kids, I got mortgages. I didn't really think of that. The other thing that really, geez, I don't want this to come out the wrong way. My view with the education system at that time was the fact that I really felt that a lot of our resources, money, personnel, man hours, we were continually helping Johnny try and catch up to the standard. So a lot of our resources are spent on the kids that aren't meeting grade level or needed help at that time. Okay. Where let's say the gifted or the elite hockey players, they weren't getting looked at, and I felt we were holding them back. And as a teacher, it was frustrating for me to see that a lot of the your time was spent, and rightfully, we needed to help Johnny catch up, but we're holding Susie back. Just with the way that everything was. Because
like you're kind of teaching like the average student, they're like the slightly below average.
Exactly.
So like if they're doing great, then you're kind of just you're not thinking about them. That's kind of like you don't really have them to.
And I think it might have been, looking back, it's more of a challenge back then because we didn't have the internet and we didn't have the ability to say, hey, listen, just go get a Chromebook and look up stuff and do this kind of stuff. Where it was more structured back in the day because we didn't have the technology that we do. So I really got turned off with that aspect, and I really felt that we were holding back our gifted kids. Okay. So it was just a little bit of an ideology that I had trouble. Yeah. So then it came a time where, again, in with hockey, and then having Gord say, you know what, you should maybe be a head coach in that. We were expecting our second child, and I promised my wife I would take a year off. So actually, I took a year off from coaching. Okay. And I applied for a job in Lloydminster as a hockey coach, and I got the job. Okay. So that put my education. This was now 2006. Okay. So I came to Fort McMurray. Well, I started teaching. It would have been, I think 2000, 2001 was my first year teaching, and by 2006 I was out.
Okay. I thought you were only teaching for like 2 years. So this is like a
5 year, 6 years.
So 5 year,
yeah. Okay. So then so then we moved to Lloydminster, and I wasn't a teacher anymore.
So what was that like? Was that weird?
Great. Yeah. I still, to this day, like I'm over 50, and I still have the feeling that I've never worked a day in my life.
Yes.
Yeah. Because you always, when you have that mindset where you get up and you just love going to work and love doing what you're doing, and you put in as much time as you want, like that's not really a job. That's a passion, and I've been extremely fortunate. So we spent 4 years in Lloydminster. Had a third child, in Lloydminster. But you know what, Fort McMurray was always home. My wife grew up here. I grew up here. We spent 4 years, and unfortunately, the feeling was that in Lloydminster, we just, you live there, but you're never going to be from there. So it's a really tight knit community. So it was tough to break in. Maybe a little bit easier for myself because I was a coach of the junior team, and I met people. But my wife, who wasn't working at the time, and had the tougher job of staying at home with the children, we got a little homesick. Yeah. So we spent 3.5, 4 years in Lloyd, and
sorry, did you play in Lethbridge or did you play in Lloyd?
I played Lethbridge, University of Lethbridge.
But then you coached in Lloyd.
Coached in Lloyd. Okay. Yeah. So then it came to a point where I had some other opportunities to leave and go to higher leagues, and it just didn't work out. And there came a time where I think it was 2009 where my wife and I just sort of said, maybe it's time to go back home.
So what was it like going from assistant to head coach? Like, did you feel like prepared for it? Was it like, again, kind of like going into teaching? Were you kind of freaking out a little bit?
Well, the thing that you like is now you're the one that's making the calls. Yeah. You're the one that has to be held accountable. Yeah. you're the one that needs to do a good job because it's got to put food on your table.
Yeah.
So I liked that aspect of it.
You were kind of forced to be driven a little bit, even though you were driven. You were also like,
but at that time, like you're still wanting to get to the next level. Like it's like teaching's a job where you're trying to get through the year and all that. Yeah. Where coaching is you're doing it. What's the end goal? Like it's to try and get to the highest level that you possibly can. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was about trying to be successful. We had it was private owners in Lloydminster, and they were super. It was a good community. The support was good, and it was interesting because again, you're the guy. Like you're the one calling the shots. So I liked that aspect.
Did you find it challenging, like? Because you're an assistant coach, you have Gord as kind of like your main, obviously like leader in the dressing room, but then you go on and now you're the one who's like the boss of other adults. Was that a weird?
No.
Like no. Why not?
I think one of the most difficult things for me at a younger stage of coaching was to delegate. I mean, I think that one of the characteristics that you need to be as a successful coach is a delegator, and you have to trust people who you're delegating duties to. I didn't have that. Like if I wanted something done right, or I would do it. So I wasn't a guy that would say, okay, you do this, and then we'll come out. No, it was like, okay, I'll do it because I know how I want it done, and I'm fairly rigid. Mm-hmm. And even now, like you talk to my wife, like I like things done. I like things done a certain way, a certain time. Mm-hmm. And I just believe in that structure. I'm not a person who can fly by the seat of his pants and well maybe and time out. Like I'm a big stickler in that, and it's just things that I believe in. So it didn't really bother me, but it was difficult to grow as a coach. You needed to give up a little bit of that responsibility because at the end of the day, when you look back, you're not maximizing your time, and it could have been spent somewhere else doing something else. So I think that's one of the things that I've gotten better at.
So what did you kind of have trouble delegating at first, and what did you like kind of learn to delegate? Do you kind of anything specifically? Would it be too hockey specific? To kind of like
a little bit too hockey specific, just from the sense, just how to instruct things and expectations. Yeah. Like I said, I'm fairly black and white. I don't and that was looking back. That was the biggest mistake that I made as my first year head coach. The biggest mistake that I made was, while I said that I was going to do certain things and live in black and white, you get to grade because you're too worried about your, your record. And I know that as a first year coach, like, so for instance, you would have one of your best players would maybe do something that he wasn't supposed to do. And then that the right thing would be to bench him or not play him. But you're thinking, well, geez, but he's my best player, and he might score a goal, and then we might win the game. Yeah. So you sacrifice that, and that's what I did, and that was probably one of the biggest things that I learned. That at the end, then you're just not going to be successful, and it's one of the things why Gord Thibodeau's the most successful junior A coach is. Gord didn't care who you were. Yeah, if you did what you were supposed to do, you played, and if you didn't, no matter who you were, you didn't play. So I think it took me a couple of years to discover that. Yeah. But I think that as a new coach, the lure for any coach is, you probably 80% of the time get hired because the team wasn't successful. So they get rid of a coach. So you're a new coach in a new situation. Yeah. Everybody wants to be that coach that in 1 year turns everything around. They went from the worst team to the best team. Their championships, it must be because of the coach, and all that. That's what everybody wants. And what you do.
The Shirelli in Boston,
exactly, right? Like that kind of stuff. And or even who was it Valsma in Pittsburgh took over halfway through the year. They were last place,
years, something like
exactly.
That. Yeah.
So and a little bit of it is is the coaching, but just a change or whatever. So how much are you willing to sacrifice? And again, you learn. So I was a head coach in Lloydminster for 3.5-4 years, and then we made the decision to come back to Fort McMurray. By this time now, Erin, my wife, was ready to go back to working, so she got a job at Westwood. And I became back another assistant coach with the Oil Barons, back under Gord. So Gord was the head guy, so I was the assistant. I was very fortunate. Gord treated me, like a co-coach, basically, because I had the experience. Yeah, exactly. So I was an assistant coach for another, I'd say 3-4 years. Back here in Fort McMurray, everything was going tickety-boo.
So back here, you were just an assistant coach. You weren't doing anything else, like you weren't subbing or doing
I was
like
working a little bit at one of the high schools. Am I allowed to say like the other side?
Yeah,
Sure. I was back at Father Merck.
Yeah.
Because at that time there was the hockey academy was there. So now now at this point, the baseball academy had shown up in Fort McMurray, the hockey academy. Yeah. So I sort of helped out, with that.
Sports is still kind of the main lane. Like you're not a teacher
no,
necessarily.
I never went back to to teach any core subjects or anything. It was always around the hockey, and then having my teaching degree helped with that requirement for even just school perspective.
For some reason, that's just like a formal passage into a school. It's like it's one thing to have a criminal record check and be a coach, but it's another one to actually be a coach and have your ed degree.
Exactly.
Like you're pretty much going to get first access to almost anything coaching related at that
and that's
point,
what happened. And that also helped, it helped supplement your income because now you're an FTE and all that kind of stuff. So it was just it was a convenience where I could be involved with the oil barons. By that time, Maya, was in school. Yeah. Max was a couple years behind in Carter, so we had 3 young kids. We moved back to Fort McMurray. This was now 2010, and
Well, plus I guess Aaron's also now
and
like
Aaron
working and stuff.
Aaron was back at Westwood, and so it was good.
So how did you kind of find the the balancing the coaching ambition with like parenthood? Like how was that? Was that kind
brutal?
Of like
Failed. Yeah. I would give myself an F.
Okay.
Because looking back right now, and it's funny, like you watch so many TV shows and you hear coaches speak. My philosophy back in the day was, it's not about the quantity of time you spend with your family, it's the quality of time. And I always tried to sell myself on the fact that when you're a coach, you have so many responsibilities. It's a long day, and then you got recruiting, and then you're traveling, and then you're missing a lot. And you're not able to be at a lot of the things that a normal dad would be.
Because you're mostly gone on weekends, especially with kids who are
always
like
especially here at Fort McMurray, you're traveling and that. So I always tried to tell myself, well, but when I'm there, I tried to be present and all that. Looking back now, it was tough, and it does, and it affects your relationship with your kids. So I don't have a. I'd like to be honest, I would have liked to have had a better relationship with my 2 older kids, Max and Maya, but it just didn't. My job didn't allow me to do that.
So what kind of advice, do you think if you had to start coaching right now, is there a different way you could have done it to kind of balance it a bit more, or is it kind of just a hard field to be in to kind of do that?
It's a hard field to be in, but I also think that if you look at things in the moment, it's difficult. You got to look big picture. Yeah. Like in the coaching world, if you don't get to it today and you have an opportunity to go to your daughter's piano recital, you should go to the piano recital, because you'll never get another opportunity to do that recital. It's always like
another clinic or another time for a meeting.
You can do that work later on or the next day, but your daughter's recital, take the time. Yeah. And it's funny because yesterday I was on social media, and Bruce Arians, who's used to coach the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, would tell his assistant coaches, if you ever miss a family event because of something, I'm going to fire you, because family is number one. And I would always tell players, family is 1, education's 1A, and the sport is 1B. Yeah. But family always comes first. And
even from a head coach perspective, it's kind of good to have that, so that they're likely going to be a better coach, because they're not going to have that kind of internal strife about kind of, because you're going to be humming and hawing, and that's going to be in your mind if you're still coaching. So totally I guess agree. Having the
totally agree with you, but but at that moment, when you're a head coach and you've got to break down video, unfortunately that was the most important thing. And looking back, I wish I would have done things a little bit differently. So now you're trying to play catch up a little bit with that. So I tell a story, and my boy Max is our middle child, and he just graduated grade 12. Max played hockey for a year or 2 because I think he felt that dad wanted him to play hockey. Yeah,
and of course, you coaching the Barons.
Exactly. So he came to me after his, I think it was 2nd or 3rd year hockey, and said, Dad, would you be mad if I didn't play hockey? I said, no. I said, I want you to do. So he did taekwondo and things like that. But he never really liked to go to the rink, even to watch, where where you would just think that, oh, they want to go to every game, but they just didn't want to. And
that's
I think
kind of like your work.
That's my work.
Really like, but even also, to them though, it's like, oh, it's just where Dad. It's like me going out of the well. Sounds like I don't want to be here.
Exactly. and the other thing is even your identity is now fixed to what I do. So he was never Max Keca. Well, you're the coach's dad, or sorry, you're the coach's son.
Yeah.
So he never really liked to go. So, which was fine. And we get to the, stage later on where he didn't have to go and and all that kind of stuff. Now he gets involved with Jerry Neville and the Oil Giants.
Oh, the man in the stand.
And now he's the man in the stand.
I love that blend of worlds.
Now he loves to go to the rink.
Yeah.
Because he's not the coach's son anymore.
Yeah.
He's Max Keca.
Yeah.
He has his own identity.
Unreal,
he's the man. He's a man in the stand.
Yeah.
So now what I find awesome is I'll go out and kids who know who I am and that'll say, "Hey, you're Max's dad." So now I'm Max's dad. He's the man in the stands.
Of it. Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's so good for him. And anybody that knows Max knows he's not athletic at all. And the fact that he's at the Oil Giants games doing the the promos for in between innings and all that. I'll never forget last year Aaron and I went to some games. And the first game that we went to, and he had to get out in the 7th inning and do Take Me Out to the Ball Game. and I'm looking at my wife going, like, there's no way that Max knows the words to Take Me Out. Like, and that's an iconic, like everybody, it's like Happy Birthday. Yeah. Everybody knows.
Yeah.
I said, like, there is no way that he knows the words.
Yeah.
So he's out there belting the tune and he's got his phone out there and I'm like, he's got the words on his screen.
Oh, 100%.
So I asked him after the game, I said, how do you know those words? I just Googled it. I said, okay.
But you know what? Being relaxed in front of a big group, that's like kind of what you were saying. Like you'd always like didn't mind doing that.
Yeah.
So that's definitely like a kind of a soft skill kind of like passed down a little bit though.
And he's like, he doesn't even realize, like, he's so gifted with like computer design things and things like that. But this year, Aaron had him come and teach an art class at Dickinsfield. So it was after hours.
The thing he painted here at the school was
the mural on the wall was great, but he went to Dickinsfield in front of a bunch of elementary kids and ran like an art club. And he was awesome for it. And he doesn't even understand how good he's just great with kids because he's
like, I'd be nervous about doing that now.
He's just the fact that his demeanor, he's so laid back. It's good, whatever. You want to do this? Sure. Where I'm like, what? You got it's structure. So he's actually unbelievable.
It's a better way to be.
Yeah.
It's just kind of because he still gets the job done, but it's
he does drives Dad crazy a little bit sometimes, but no, he's great. With and he loves doing that Oil Giants stuff. He loves doing the oil baron things, and then he loves being with the kids and that. So he's pretty funny.
Did you ever coach like any other sports other than hockey, or has it always kind of just been hockey?
Gee, I'm trying to think. No, it was just all been hockey. I mean, obviously I helped out with like soccer or whatever. I think what sometimes ends up happening when you're in a small community like Fort McMurray, and then Keca's not a real common name. So whenever anybody and my kids ended up playing baseball and softball and soccer. Yeah. When the last, Tom will help out. So I ended up helping out. But
I guess
to be coach, it was always difficult because, again, I always felt that if you're going to coach and put your name to something, like you better be committed. And I couldn't with my job. It just didn't allow me to do that. But I tried to be at all of the games in the summertime and help out where I could.
That's even kind of been like, I've voiced this to you and pretty much everyone who coaches sports here at the school is like, being in, like, my whole thing with teaching was like, because some people will say, I want to go into teaching because I want to coach. But I always wanted to go into teaching because I love social studies. For some reason, that was just like my lane. Don't ask me why that happened. But even like growing up, I always just played like backyard sports. Played everything. Watched every sport on TV, but like to play organized, like I never played hockey till I was 13 or 14.
It shows.
Never played. I know.
I heard about it.
Well, but now everyone's like, oh, like you're kind of like one of the younger athletic teachers, like no kids, like you should coach everything, or like not coach everything. But I'm like, I don't have a formal background in like any of these sports, and I almost find like kind of wondering like where you always wanted to be a coach. Like if you tried a different sport, was that challenging not really having played that? Because even going in to be a junior coach, even an assistant coach, you played literally for that team. Yeah. And you have some separation. So you do, and you have some kind of post-hockey experience. But I guess like if you're going to talk to a young teacher who's going to coach a sport they never really played, like how would you advise that? Or would you even encourage them to do that?
Wow, that's such a great point. I wouldn't advise it.
Yeah. Like a small school,
because
no
I think,
one else is there.
But you know
like,
what the difference is, and you correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
You said you played backyard sports and all, and played a bunch.
Yeah.
Your opinion, do kids do that nowadays? No, because we become so sport specific, so specialized in everything. Like I find it absolutely crazy. Yeah. And listen, I think hockey parents, and I tell hockey parents, they are batshit crazy.
Yeah.
Because these hockey was never meant to be 24/7, 365.
Yeah.
But it is.
Because
when the season's done, now I'm playing spring, I'm going here, I'm going there, and it's hockey. Like it's baseball. So now what I think, to be honest with you, like I hate the fact that too many kids get too specialized in a certain sport, and you can't. Because right now, I know for a fact, like I'll tell you a story. When I was in Lloydminster, the team wanted to go out and do some other kind of activities. Mm-hmm. So they called me up and said, Kex, can we go play volleyball? No problem.
Yeah.
I thought it was great. They go out and my best player totally rips his rotator cuff playing volleyball. I'm like,
oh, okay.
So now they call me. They're going, oh, Kex, we got to take turns to the hospital because he hurt himself. I said, doing what? Well, he went up to spike a ball and he missed the ball and then he got his hand caught in the net. And then as he fell down, it ripped his rope. So he was gone for like a long time.
Because it's like a 4-month, 6-month recovery.
So now you're sitting there as a coach saying, like these kids, some of them can't even walk, chew gum, and dribble a basketball. And even now,
they don't have like the mechanics for like any other sport.
You see phys ed classes here at our school. Mm-hmm. You see kids that don't even know the basic rules.
And that's the thing. I always felt like I know the rules for everything, but to actually make you a better player, like that to me, I don't have that.
But back in the day, the first day of gym class, like so, if we were doing basketball or volleyball, the first day of that, we were in a classroom, and the teacher would get up there on the chalkboard. People don't even know what a chalkboard is nowadays, but they would draw the basketball or the volleyball court, and they would write all lines. This is the sideline. This is the end line. This is the service area. This is the net. So you would know what it is. Like now, playing soccer.
Yeah.
I take the peak kids out, when hockey's done, and we're going to play soccer. I bet you there are 70% of the kids that don't know how to throw the ball in. Like it's a throw in.
Yeah.
They don't know how to throw it. I'm like, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, just put two hands behind it. Like,
so I guess, well, that's kind of actually a good question because you've been around elite hockey talent. So going around like hockey specifically, like, is it the kids who are in hockey all year? Are those ones that kind of end up becoming the more elite ones? Like, is there credibility to the argument of like, no, I want my kid to be a single sport athlete and be in it all the time?
I think it's the worst thing that we can do. Because and this is speaking just from the hockey sense now, when you see the skill level of players, like when you look at today's NHL and the skill level of Sidney Crosby, Nate McKinnon, Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, the skill level of hockey players has skyrocketed.
Yeah.
What hasn't is hockey IQ. Okay. We've got so many more kids that are so skilled because now I can, Power Edge Pro where I can do this, I can tap boxes, and all this. But for me to actually think the game, I have trouble thinking the game. And as a coach, that's the biggest challenge that we have is trying to increase somebody's hockey IQ. So how do you do that? You play a lot of small area games, you do this and that. But how's the other thing? By playing other sports.
Yeah.
So you draw parallels. Like, for us, it was, we were very fortunate with the Oil Barons. One year we went to Russia for the World Junior A Cup. And when we were there, we saw how many hockey teams are like playing soccer.
Yeah,
that's fair. So you sit there going, well, why are they playing so much soccer? The obvious answer would be because of the fitness, because you're running.
Yes. Yeah.
But you know what? It's the concept of space. How do I make space? I pass the ball, I run, I create space.
It's a similar idea to hockey. Like,
and that's it. So now you take that on the big, soccer field, and now you have to apply that into a hockey thing. Yeah. And that's why, to me, again, like I watch the World Juniors, and we all understand that Canada is the rough, tough. We're going to dump and chase. We're going to bang bodies. We're going to compete. But if you were to overall critique on style of play, like the Europeans, like the Finns, Swedes, like those guys, like they just play a different game. Because I think that they are more in tune with other sports.
Okay, so they, in other words, they kind of get better at the specifics, but not necessarily to the benefit of their entire game.
The concept. So if you play, so right now, with my children, with Carter, who's the only athlete out of 3, plays hockey and wanted to play a sport, and I encourage him to play lacrosse.
Yeah.
Because lacrosse, first of all, hand-eye coordination is great.
Yes, 100%.
It's a little bit rougher. So, I mean, you got to toughen up. But the fact that you're running, so now you got your fitness, but also the ball movement and creating space. Like there's so many parallels between hockey and lacrosse. When I'll tell a story. When I was growing up, and again, my dad was a soccer player. So my first year hockey, I'll never forget this. My dad's like, okay, so hockey's done. We never had spring hockey. Yeah. Hockey's done. Now you have to pick a sport. What do you want to play? I said, Dad, I want to play baseball. And my dad said, wrong. What do you mean? And my dad says, you're gonna play soccer. I was like, what do you mean I'm gonna play soccer? And, all my buddies play baseball. Yeah. My dad said no. He says, you're gonna play soccer because first of all you get to run, and it's gonna be good cardio. And secondly, my dad said, I know about soccer, so I can coach. Yes. So my dad coached me all through, and I was pretty good at soccer. We won, teams back then. We won some provincial championships. Yeah. I went to a tryout for the the national team and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. So it was just the parallels, were there. And so with Carter, he plays lacrosse, in the off season. So, but I think that nowadays when you talk about sports, that we just have too many kids that are just too driven by one sport. And I don't think that that's healthy for anybody. So that's why I believe as a coach, it is more challenging as a teacher, because the knowledge of the sport, like the kids know a lot more about the sport. Yeah. So where you're a teacher who was a coach, you didn't necessarily need to know all the intricacies of the sport. Yeah. But now you need to, because the kids are going to question you. And if you don't know the answer, you're going to lose.
100%. And that's that's been my main crutch, is even I played football, but only in grade 12, only 9-man. Yeah. To then go and help out the 12-man team. I'm like, whoa, this is 2 different worlds. It's the same sport, similar fundamentals, but only playing for a year. Some of these kids are actually kind of been playing for longer than I did. Yeah. So but then kind of being asked to be a coach. Every time I've asked, well, now how do I get better at coaching? Just watch some videos on YouTube. But this is the thing where I'm that doesn't make me feel confident in just kind of relaying a drill that they could just go watch on YouTube. You know what I mean? I don't know what my role is here that's supposed to move them to the next. Hello, everyone. Just wanted to say hi again and thank you for listening to the episode today. If you're interested, you can tune into episode 2 of 2 with Tom Keca next week. If you have any questions or any stories that you would like to share of your own, please do not hesitate to send me an email at lucasrdclark97@gmail.com or at mrclark.afterdark on Instagram. If there are any problems with professionalism, or that you feel any specific individual was targeted or have any problems with this video, please, again, do not hesitate to let me know. Thank you very much, and see you next time, unless you're scared.